Good morning, friends. Sorry to be a bit late today because of some usual things. Hangover of festival doesn't go easily. Anyway, we'll begin right away. And today we'll be talking about democracy in India. I think some of you might have been there when we took the last class. In the last class, we did discuss indirectly the pattern of Indian society before freedom movement and after freedom movement. So now today we'll be focused mainly on how did democracy come in India, how did it progress during last 70 years, and how do we see the democratic values today. Just a rough recapitulation. Earlier, we used to have kingdoms, and earlier they do say that there was democracy in Greece, but that democracy was in a slave-owning society. You all must be knowing that we have talked about earlier systems of society where there were hunter food gatherers, then nomadic tribes, and then kingdoms. One thing which we did not talk last time was a slave-owning society in which a particular person, a man or woman, is a slave. So in Greece, the democracy which was there was practically the democracy of slave owners. So that is a funny part. Democracy, basically how it evolved, the concept and all that. But that rudiments of democratic society should not be forgotten. Second is, some people say that we had democracy and kings were elected through democracy, which I don't agree. Because I see that in democracy, all the people of the country have to be part of it. And the type of society, kings were never elected. By and large, as we recall, kingdoms had different logic. And within the royal family, there used to be disputes between brothers as to who will come to power. So there are many examples. Some people cite the example of Aurangzeb. Pavani is making a right point that the power passed on in a hereditary manner. Some people quote Aurangzeb that as to how cruel he was, that he murdered his brothers to come to power. That is very true, but it doesn't involve only Aurangzeb. Many kings were there who killed their kith and kin to come to power. We know the example of Emperor Ashok also killed many of his cousins to come to power. We also should recall that in our neighboring country, Nepal, also King Gyanendra killed whole of his brother's family to come to power. So kingdoms had a different logic, and as Pavani is using a very appropriate term, it was hereditary. But in addition to heredity, if there are many siblings of the king, then there used to be a dispute. Sometimes the eldest son was an automatic choice, but that always did not work. It also depended on different type of things, right? So the concept of democracy actually begins with the concept of modern nation states. So there are kingdoms, there are empires, and at that time, you see the three major functions of the state. Three major functions of the state is to make the laws, to give judgments about the laws, and to rule over the society. All these three powers were vested with the king, single person who decides about everything. And kings most of the times, used to have collaboration with clergy, dharma guru clergy. Like it is very classically known that in Europe, king and pope were allies. But that is a classically known example. But if you see anywhere, Raja, Rajguru, Nawab, Shahi Imam, and king and the pope. These are few of the examples where clergy used to provide the ideological framework, ideological legitimacy for the rule of the king. Okay, so these are the kingdoms, and democracy actually starts beginning with the Industrial Revolution. And the most best known example here is then again of French Revolution, 1779, when the power of the feudal lords, power of the clergy was overthrown, and the elected people came to power. Now, so here you see the drastic change from feudal society to industrial society, one. Second, we see the change from monarchy, empire to the elected representatives. So this is one thing which happened in France. And with this, for the first time in the history, the people, they became part of the process of governance. In what way? By choosing which particular group will rule them. By choosing which particular group will rule them. This is called party-based democracy. By and large, of course, today in the world, there are different systems of governance. There are different systems of governance, and there are few countries which are fully democratic. We'll see what are the criterion for full democracy. And democracy, again, is a dynamic process. It is not static. Sometimes democracy is replaced by authoritarian regime, like we saw in India during emergency, when Indira Gandhi imposed emergency for, I think, 18 to 20 months, where all democratic rights, freedom of expression, kept suspending. So this is one example. Then there are many examples that some people are pointing out the example of North Korea, etc., etc. So in world today, many countries are having authoritarian regimes. These authoritarian regimes many times have come through military dictators. You see in our neighboring Myanmar, their democracy did come in, but was soon replaced by military generals. And again, then there is a struggle between democratic forces of Suu Kyi and the military powers as to who will rule. So military junta, military complex. Similarly in Pakistan, it did come as a democratic society, democratic government, but soon it was replaced by the military dictatorship of Ayub Khan. And military dictatorship generally has three components in South Asian countries. What are these three components of military dictatorship? Number one, the military becomes a big established power, controlling everything. Second, it has alliance with feudal lords. And third, the clergy, it gets again legitimacy from clergy. So this is military dictatorship. So we will, before coming to democracy, because democracy can stand better in contrast. So what is not democratic? We saw authoritarian regimes where a single person who does come to get elected through the democratic process later on gradually tries to do away with the democratic rights and becomes the sole authoritarian power. That is one. Secondly, sometimes military overthrows the elected representatives and assumes the power. It is military junta. I don't know how that word came into be, but military. Third is the individual. Fourth example also I'll give of authoritarian regimes, and that is of some parties. Some parties having authoritarian regime, like in Russia, in China, communist parties which came to power through either revolutions, but overall the idea was to give up the power, but in due course they concentrated more power in their hands to abolish democracy. Now, some of the successful examples of democracy are, of course, in most industrialized societies with social welfare, like Europe, United Kingdom, and America. Interestingly, in United Kingdom, where to me the democratic values should be high. Of course, recently in the ranking of VDEM is an international organization giving the listing of democratic indices. Democratic indices are basically around freedom of expression, freedom of dissidence, articulation of your opinion, and decentralization of power and security of weaker sections of society. That's what I will repeat it again later. So there are many criterion for democratic indices, and in that indices currently Norway in Europe is the highest. Similarly, of course, I presume in the United Kingdom, of course, everything runs in the name of monarch. So they did a very interesting thing. So there was monarchy. They kept the monarch and took away monarchy. That's the interesting thing. Monarch remains. Everything is done in the name of the king, but king does not know what is happening because all the affairs are run in a very democratic, secular way by the elected representatives of the people in United Kingdom. Similarly, in America also, you see most of the affairs are run in the name of by the elected party. There are a lot of underpinnings of that we will see when we come to the example of India as to how in India democracy developed. So these are some of the major political systems we will see. But in order to see as to what democracy basically means, I will give 2 or 3 major criteria. These criteria you should remember. Number 1, so basic criteria of democracy, there should be clean elections. Clean elections which are impartial, which are fair. There is no doubt about EVM machines. There is no distortion, booth capture. Earlier, today we are having EVM machine and many people have doubts about EVM machines. They feel that this has been manipulated. Earlier, when the ballot system was there, many times the bullies of a particular leader used to capture the whole booth. They used to go to the booth, they used to capture the booth, they used to turn away the voters, put the stamp on their leaders, this thing, and put it in the ballot box. So booth capturing, then EVM machines are under also the cloud. So first thing of democracy is the cleanliness, impartiality of elections. Fortunately, in India, election commission should not be under the government. Government is a ruling part, but election commission is supposed to be supervising the elections. Initially, when the election commission was formed, it did its job very properly by holding free elections. But sometimes people are doubting about the neutrality of the election commissioners. We have, I think, chief election commissioner and 2 other election commissioners who have equal power, but one of them is a chief one. So some people are doubting today the neutrality of the election commission. So first thing of the democracy is clean elections. Second is freedom of association. What is freedom of association? In freedom of associations, people can come together, they can form their organizations. It may be non-governmental or NGOs, political parties, or association for particular campaigns. Like there are campaigns for environmental betterment. So there can be an organization. There is a organization like Narmada Bachao Andolan, which came up. Basically, it came up in the name of Narmada, but it is trying to protect the rights of Sorry, there was some network problem. So we were talking, number one, about the impartiality of the elections, and partiality of one of the election commissioners can tilt the election in a heavy way, which cannot be counted as a proper democracy. Second, I was talking of freedom of association, and I gave examples that this association can be at the informal level, like non-government organizations. Some of them are registered, some of them are not registered, but they take up a cause of, like, for example, child security of the child. These days, you must have seen on television many advertisement about the Nobel laureate Kailash Satyarthi, and that organization is trying to protect the children from sexual abuse. Similarly, you must have heard about NAPM, National Alliance for People's Movement, which began as Narmada Bachao, but is trying to protect the rights of many tribal and other people in their particular life situation. So third type of association comes in the form of political parties, right? So democracy means that there is a freedom of association. So first I said non-registered organizations, non-government organizations, political parties, and like you can have literary clubs, film clubs, and sports clubs and all that. So that freedom is granted in democratic rights. And third, and the most important, is freedom of expression. Now, freedom of expression, actually, if you see the struggle of India's independence, freedom of expression was one of the main issues which freedom movement raised. You may be remembering that Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak was imprisoned in Mandale jail, Rangoon, which was a part of the British Empire earlier, for merely writing articles. So when people write article, they give the free speech, they give the speech, they are arrested. This is curb on the freedom of expression. There can be other part also. Some people, under the garb of freedom of expression, they spread hate. They try to instigate the people for violence and anti-national activities. So both the things are there. When people do the expression, freedom of expression means that you are free to express their opinions without being damaging to the state. Damaging to the state in the physical sense means if you are instigating the people for violence, that is not permitted. But if you are giving your opinion, okay, in my area this is a problem, it should not be like that. If you are giving the opinion that notebandi, whatever you call it in English, that notebandi or demonetization is not correct, those type of opinions you are able to give. You are able to give the opinion that our environment is getting greatly damaged. Like we recently in Delhi, those who are in Delhi must have seen the plight of Yamuna because of the festival which we enjoyed. So these opinions come under freedom of expression. So these are the three major things which come under the democratic rights. Now, of course, we have our own opinion. Many people before Delhi riots who talked about maintaining peace, maintaining amity, maintaining harmony, they were arrested. Now, this is the attitude of government. Some people who instigated the violence, they were not arrested. So here there is a lot of complexity, but objectively and honestly, if your opinion doesn't instigate violence, if you're talking of peace, if you're talking of welfare of the people, that doesn't come under the violation of freedom of expression. So I hope you will remember these three things: clean election, freedom of association, and freedom of expression. These are the foundations of any democracy. Now we will see that how in India the democratic values develop. So first thing we remember that you all were knowing that we had kingdoms, not one, but multiple scattered kingdoms all over. And the biggest empires we saw was that of Emperor Ashok and later on Aurangzeb. These were the two big empires which we had, but at the same time, there were many kings who were not under their control. Of course, you know that in kingdom there is a hierarchy of landlord, king, and emperor. So this is the hierarchy in the kingdoms. But of course, as the British came, they controlled nearly 60% of the land mass of the country, and 40% of the land mass was in the form of princely states. You remember, there were 550 princely states, which later on were integrated into India with the great efforts of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and his associate V.P. Menon in the cabinet, because he was the home minister. He did this sort of a thing. So this is what you have to remember. So India became a nation state and aspired for democracy. The elements of democracy were integral to the freedom movement of the country. One example I gave you was Lokmanya Tilak. Second example I'll give you, Mahatma Gandhi's Champaran movement of farmers. Currently also farmers are agitating. Mahatma Gandhi, when he did movement in Champaran, people tried to associate, and that time the freedom of movement and all that, there are a lot of restrictions on that. State can many a times implicate people on the wrong things also. So Mahatma Gandhi there stood boldly, organized the peasants. So what he did first is association. So Mahatma Gandhi's thing was bringing the people together, number one. Similarly, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel in Bardoli and Kheda, he organized the peasants. Jawaharlal Nehru, he organized the peasants in Uttar Pradesh, UP. So these are the examples of so first example in India's freedom movement I gave you, freedom of expression. And for punishing some people for freedom of expression, Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak's example is there. Second, for freedom of association, Mahatma Gandhi many times was imprisoned. He was targeted by the ruling government under various laws of sedition. Of course, sedition law came at the British time, which stands totally opposed to the people's right to have free association. So of course, by that time, election commission's idea was not there, but through this, Indian national movement was able to overthrow the British Empire. And as we got independence, democracy became the central hallmark of India. How did it become? Because we have our constitution, which is one of the remarkable constitutions. And here I must tell you, Indian constitution, there are various things which you will, Dawood is asking, freedom of expression, what does it mean? Freedom of expression, as I have explained in detail, it means that in the society, I have a freedom to express my opinion, so far as it doesn't go against the physical security of others. My freedom of expression stops where it starts becoming physically damaging to other or to the state. So I can talk about environment, I can talk about political issues, I can talk about minority rights, I can talk about Dalit rights, I can talk about women's rights. So this all comes under freedom of expression, which Pavni is correctly telling us comes under Article 19. Okay, so freedom of expression, right in the beginning, if you see our constitution, which I will not go into detail, broadly I will say Indian constitution incorporated all the values of democracy in its constitution. So this is one, this is a baseline. Baseline is what? Liberty, equality, fraternity, social justice. But then there is another part. What is another part? Another part is that some sections of the society are weak and left behind. So there has to be an affirmative action for these sections of society. So the first affirmative action which came was for Dalits. SC, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And for women, the affirmative action did come slowly, but like there are demands that women should get 35% of reservation in Lok Sabha seats. There should be, but there is no properly formulated policies as far as women are concerned. But OBCs in 1990, Mandal Commission was implemented, giving them 26% reservation. So this some people call as appeasement. Basically, affirmative action is a part of democratic society. Because what is the first sentence? What is in the preamble? What do we say? To strive towards equality. How can we go towards a equal society unless we give protection to the weaker sections of society? We give them an encouragement. We give them support from the state, from the society, so that they can come to the equal level. So when India became independent, these were the foundations, and our constitution incorporated most of these things related to protection of minorities. Article 25 to 30 talk about protection of minorities and freedom of religion. Please note, when we are talking of freedoms, freedom of expression, similarly, there is a freedom of religion. Many people are currently attacking the freedom of religion under the various guise, but freedom of religion is an integral part of our morality, social norms, and constitutional values. Currently, of course, things are turning into a different direction. So, as India became independent, what were the problems Indian democracy faced? Please remember, this is important to know that as India became independent, many people sitting abroad, even our colonial masters, the British also felt that India cannot survive as a nation. India cannot survive as a democracy because there is a lot of diversity of religion, caste, language, and ethnicity. So they felt that India will disintegrate. This was their idea. But Indian democracy showed that we have inner resilience. And that lot of credit of this goes to Mahatma Gandhi, because we did not get democracy as a ripened fruit. We got democracy through a long struggle, through a long mass movement, which made us a nation. Please note, even before Gandhi, there was national struggle, there was struggle for freedom. But how did Gandhi transform it, which gave us inner strength as a democracy? He transformed it by uniting the people through mass movement. It may be 1920 non-cooperation movement, or it may be 1930 civil disobedience movement, it may be Dandi March, or it may be 1942 Quit India movement. All these made us into a nation. There is diversity in religion, language, ethnicity, but this is what connected us as a fraternity. So that's an important word for democracy, that we regard all the people as a part of our fraternity. Sorry, of course, fraternity is a male-dominated word, but we can use in that sense community, like we all belong to an Indian community, and that gave us resilience. It is because of that we kept united. So first is people warned that India may collapse. India may collapse because of its diversity, but that did not turn out. We withstood that pressure very, very successfully and remarkably to come up as a single nation. Now, the second danger which we faced was massive poverty. At that time, you can't imagine that we had shortage of food grains. So India had to have alliance, had to have pact with America and import the grains. So United States, there was a scheme through which the America used to send its poor quality wheat, which there they use for cattle, that used to be imported. So that was a condition of our poverty that we had to face because of extreme poverty, lack of resources. So number two, number three, even the health situation was not very good. Why? Because at that time, the longevity average lifespan was around 39 years. So see the dangers which the country was facing. Then illiteracy. Today, some of the states are having 100% literacy, like Kerala. Tamil Nadu is going close to that. Some of the states are going close to that. So third danger was educational backwardness. Fifth danger is that India will not be able to have proper industrialization. Of course, you see many countries who became independent when we became independent, like Pakistan, then Sri Lanka, and other. Myanmar got independence slightly before us, but none of them developed education, scientific establishment, health facilities, and industries the way India did. People were feeling at that time that because of these handicaps, India's democracy will not survive. And Alok Srivastava is correctly pointed out, Green Revolution, and here I will add, there was a Green Revolution, that intense production of food grains, and this was mainly because of that initially formation of big dams like Bhakra Nangal. And at that time, Pandit Nehru in his speech said that these are the modern temples of India. Of course, one can extend his sentence that why Indian democracy survived was because of this policy, where we focus more on dams, means irrigation, agriculture, education at all the levels, and the most prestigious thing for which some of you may be competing, places like IIT and other prestigious universities. Then scientific establishments. Scientific establishments that time sounded like an investment for a poor country, but it was because of that later on our educational institutes could get deepened. It is because of that our industrialization process could catch up with the industrialization process of the world. And we are very happy that after 1980s, India's soft power, its intellectual manpower, is dominating in many of the modern industries in the world. So what was a threat, what was a challenge, was overcome successfully, mainly because of the policies undertaken in the decade of 1950s and 1960s in particular. So what were these policies? Now, of course, there also came a problem of languages, diverse languages. You go to Britain, a particular language of English will be accepted easily by everybody. But here, the diversity of languages from Tamil Nadu to Kashmir, from Assam to Gujarat and central parts of India, so many languages. So we came to a formula. Initially, it was thought that Hindi will be the national language, but then people realized Hindi is the basic language of nearly 35 to 40% of the people only. So that will leave 60% of the people into disadvantage. People rebelled against it. Tamil Nadu, that time it was called Madras province, it did not accept it. And then we accepted the policy of linguistic states, which went on very successfully and is doing good things. So basically, it is a democratic spirit of governance where you modify your ideas depending on the needs of all the people. If Hindi imposed, because I remember that time I was a student, initially I felt, of course, Hindi should be the national language. But later on, I realized when I met friends in some inter-college competitions, friends from Tamil Nadu and all that, I realized that yes, if we make Hindi as the only national language, then South people will have problem. So that was sorted out like that. Second, the condition of women was very atrocious. Illiteracy was there. Illiteracy was much higher amongst the girls and women. So there was a proactive step which is visible in last 3 decades to promote education. And I must say another thing which strengthened our democracy is our family welfare program. Many people by mistake call it family planning program. It was introduced like that, but coming in the hindsight, I think it was more of a family welfare program. Means there should be a balanced family. If couple doesn't have children, promote them to help them to have children. Couple and promote them into the methods whereby the family can be planned. And lately, of course, I must say, though there are a lot of misconceptions about it, about particular communities, our rate of rise of growth is declining. Roughly, I can say that 2.1 child per couple, 2.1 child per couple is the basic norm where the population remains static. Population can remain static. We began with very high number, close to 3 plus, and lately it has come down to 2.4. Of course, there are people may blame that one community does not follow these norms, but if you go to the truth of this, we find that even amongst Muslims who are targeted for this, their rate of rise of population is falling. Their adoption of family planning techniques is rising. So overall, a equilibrium in the population system is being very well achieved. So democracy basically, as we are seeing in India, so first I said the type of threats which it faced. Now second was development of regionalism. We are a federal state where all the countries, all the states have some power. Central government has some power. But over a period of time, regionalism grew very high, and regional parties ruling in different states is a symbol of that. So this became another particular thing. But the mechanism of balancing this central power, state power, federal powers and state powers, combining them two, has been very well managed so far. Now, so these were the initial challenges to Indian democracy when we became independent. So, but I must say that they were very well overcome. And in the initial period, politics in the name of religion was also very weak, because when politics comes, when politics comes under the garb of religion, then many of the democratic rights, they get suppressed, and the focus of the country shifts away from the basic needs of bread, butter, shelter, employment, education, and health. Bread, butter, shelter, employment, education, and health. It shifts from that to the religiosity of a dominant group, and that drags the whole nation into a particular abyss where the things happen like that. Now, why is democracy important? Now, when we elect the when they elect our representatives are supposed to follow the mandate of the people, which are dictated by needs of the people. And that's where we saw that in 1975, when Indira Gandhi felt insecure about her continuance as Prime Minister because of the Allahabad High Court judgment, she imposed emergency. But fortunately, of course, it lasted for 18 months, and then it was lifted. She was routed away from power. So why is democracy important? That here, opinion of the people goes to the top. And that's where there is a central role of parliament, the state assemblies. What do these do? Here, not only the ruling party, but even the opposition party is important. Opposition party is also important. Number one, to control on the excesses of the ruling party. Number two, to try to take people's issues to the top. So in an ideal democracy, there are four things which are very important. Ideal democracy, one is a executive. This, of course, is the most important part of the any democracy, which by and large is elected, controls all the powers, most of the powers, executive. Then second is judiciary. Judiciary is, of course, also very important because judiciary is the guardian of our constitution. So whenever the executive, now some Pavni is asking to execute. Yeah, so executive basically means that these are the people who are supposed to execute the policies and implement the policies. And this, I will say, is the most powerful wing of democracy. But the problem lies that if the executive does the excesses, it has to be controlled. It has to be controlled, and that control comes from judiciary. So, but unfortunately, the appointment of judges is also done by executive. So sometimes in judiciary also some weaknesses can come. But if the judiciary is strong, that is the best guarantee. That is the best guarantee for the implementation of the rule of law. Implementation of the rule of law, and that acts as a brake. That acts as a brake on the executive, which executes its power. So judiciary, executive, and then legislative. Legislative is the one which formulates the laws in the form of assemblies and parliament. And the fourth thing, which is not in power, but is a very called as a fourth estate of democracy, that is the media. Now, media, of course, currently media is in the form of television, print media, and social media. So earlier, when we became independent, there was a radio. Radio, of course, I don't know how many people listen to radios these days. Media was the most powerful part of the press. What is the role of the media? The role of the media is to keep evaluating the policies of the executive, to keep evaluating the policies of the judiciary and legislative. So it is called the fourth estate, and its basic job is to speak truth to power. To speak truth to power is the central dictum of the media. That we have to see that many times a large section of our current media is doing the reverse role. It is trying to criticize and curb and condemn the opponents and keep praising the government all the time. Praising others is not bad, but when you keep praising others, the government, who will rectify the policies? The basic point of democracy is that it is we together who will form policies. It is we together whose opinions will get reflected in the government policies. So government policies do not drop from the heaven. They are the mean statistical, not exact statistical, but ideological mean of what we want to express. So that basically is democracy. But media, when it turns hostile, aggressive against criticism by the opposition parties and keeps licking the boots of the ruling party, that one pillar of democracy collapses. And unfortunately, when I'm talking today, so these are the basic components. Today, what is happening? First, we talked of emergency. Now, some people today, when they evaluate Indian democracy today, they feel that Indian democracy is a controlled autocracy. Like in a democracy, there is a cabinet system of governance. The cabinet ministers, all of them are equal, and prime minister is first amongst the equals. He is not the controller of other ministers. So today, of course, this cabinet system is being replaced by the vesting of authority in a single person. It is not good for democracy. There should be diverse voices, diverse rich inputs which should come in. So that is one. Secondly, many of the people in judiciary, they out of their selfish grounds, earlier we saw because of their selfish grounds, they have been very partial towards the ruling government. Like one Supreme Court Chief Justice, he retired as the Chief Justice and immediately he was appointed as a nominated member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. So this type of a temptation to be in the good books of the government, so that later on you can get plum postings, is very injurious for the health of democracy. So judiciary has to follow the rule of law. Currently, again, it seems there is a bit of a recovery in that, but that's where the democracy is a dynamic process. It's not static. So there was democracy, there was emergency, and currently some people call it as undeclared emergency. And why I'm being critical about it? Because there is an organization called VDEM. It's an international organization which keeps assessing the state of democracy in various countries. It gives the rankings, and in the ranking of 21, India's ranking has fallen to 53. Earlier in 2014, it was 51. So 51, from 51, it has fallen down to 53. And as I said, Norway is the top as far as the democratic indices are concerned. Then again, we see a lot of attacks on religious minorities, Muslims and Christians. That again goes against the freedom of religion. That again goes against the affirmative action of the state. That goes against the basic norms of a good democracy. One of the definitions of democracy is that how secure the minorities feel. More secure the minorities feel, stronger is the democracy. And in that context, I see that Indian democracy today is fairly weakening gradually. Many people who do the crime, physical crime, hate, on one side there is freedom of expression, on other side there is a hate and derogatory words directed against religious minorities. There are provocative speeches which incite violence, and unfortunately these people are not being curtailed. In a democracy, those people who spread hatred, so there is a difference between freedom of expression and spreading deliberate hatred. Those spreading deliberate hatred, if they are not punished, they become more emboldened and they try to take their agenda much further, which overall is divisive to the values of the country, divisive to what we have achieved during last so many years of our freedom movement and first 5-6 decades of our independent republic. So this, friends, I will like to give some time for your questions. So basically, we have to understand that in democracy, like the Norway model, again, there are different models also. We have representative democracy, Westminster model, first past the poll. First past the poll means like I am contesting an election, my opponent gets one vote more than me, he gets elected and I lose. This is Westminster model. And there is another this thing which comes in the form of proportional representation. What is proportional representation? In proportional representation, depending on what percentage of votes you get the number of seats. Of course, today it is very difficult to change over to that system where I personally feel proportional representation is much better than the present Westminster model, where a single vote can decide between the victory and defeat. In proportional representation, what happens? I get one vote less, but my party overall will have bigger representation, and that depends on the number of votes. I'll call you back in 2 minutes. Hello. I'll call you in 5 minutes. So this again is a structural flaw in our democracy, because that time it was not felt whether such a situation will arise. Anyway, all said and done, Indian democracy has a lot of solid components in this. Now, with this, I end my presentation. Your questions are welcome, and I'll begin with Pavani's remark about population. Now, population, of course, is a problem, and population is also a resource. But as I pointed out, and you can refer to many of the things, that India's population policy, which was began to be implemented in 1960, is already yielding result. So the imposition, as it was done in China, that you can't have more than one child, that norm failed. It did not work. In India, it was persuasion. And because of persuasion, as I told you, the rate of fertility, what is it? Number of children per couple. Rate of fertility has fallen down during the last 40 years from 3+ to 2.4. 2.1 is the ideal number, which keeps the population in balance. And so even if the present policies of family welfare, family planning are maintained, within a decade or so, we should stabilize our population. And of course, I will tell you the other problem also, that many European countries are having negative growth. Their population is falling. And the government there has to encourage the people to have more children and more this thing, so that they can have it. Now, Alok Srivastava asked me about Russia. In Russia, one doesn't know much about Russia's population policy, but overall, it is a dictatorial country. It came up as a aftermath of communist dictatorship, and today also it follows more or less. It did become a superpower at one time, but today it is like Russia and China are two big examples of communist dictatorships. In China, as I told you, the imposition of one-child norm failed and it did not work. In Russia, one is not much aware as to what is happening in Russia. But what I can say with confidence, that India's path of persuasion, India's path of encouragement of education and economic growth, if these three things are combined, the population will fall in a natural way, and that I feel within a decade, India will achieve that goal over a period of decade or so. Now, communism is a separate topic. I don't think I will take it up here. Communism as such, you must have been knowing about Karl Marx. He kept a dream, a utopia, that the society will be based on commune. And there should be two things in communism, according to Karl Marx. One is equality. Economic level, and second is freedom. Equality and freedom. In communist revolutions, because they did not work in that direction and because of a lot of global factors, freedom was abolished and they tried to go towards equality. And how much equality they can maintain without freedom, one does not know. But of course, China is another model where many of us are blindly impressed by it, but one does not know too much. Even there are also economic disparities and lot of dissatisfactions in countries like China also. So one can't say that communism has failed in that sense, but communism has lifted many of the feudal countries into the industrial society. So how do we evaluate? Like Russia before communism's takeover was an absolutely backward feudal country, no industrial production, no proper health, no proper education. And after that, now it became a superpower. China was again similar. Now they have become superpower. So it means it is not ideal, but in their situation, they lifted their own countries, but at a great price of sacrificing freedom. So I will not say communism has failed. Still, humanity has a long way to go towards an ideal situation of equality and freedom. India so far was following a some way middle path, some equality, some freedom and all that. But from last decade or so, this trend is being curtailed. And that's why we see India's ranking in democracy is falling. Democratic index, India is following. And some people call it as undeclared emergency, which may not be too much of an exaggeration. Yeah, Pavni is clarifying that she is saying that one child norm in China failed. Very true. See, whenever you try to impose things which are unnatural, they are not likely to succeed. China is example. And India did the other path. India, I mean, see, you see, there are three things for a ideal family planning situation. One is access to resources. Second is alleviation of poverty. Third is education. Improve the education, improve the facilities, try to alleviate the poverty, and the number of children per family will come down. That's very correct thing. So Chinese model, actually India has really followed a very good model as far as family welfare is concerned. So friends, with this, I think I have, sorry, today I was late because of some reasons. And I hope I have been able to communicate to you the state of what is democracy, state of democracy in India, the declining democratic index in India, and how we should try to see that media plays its role of criticizing the government plays its role of promoting diversity and freedom, including freedom of religion. So, okay, friends, with this, I take a leave of you, and I am really enjoying talking to you people. Hope we meet again soon with another topic. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.